Welcome to SUGi Talks. At SUGi, we plant biodiverse pocket forests in urban areas and restore at-risk ecosystems around the world. Our mission is to help cities build climate resilience, biodiversity, and well-being using nature-based solutions. On this podcast, we'll speak with our expert forest makers, scientists, and collaborators about reimagining the urban experience and how we can better use nature to build healthier habitats for all life. Make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to support more. By the east side of the Cascade Mountains, in the southern region of what's now known as Washington, the ancestral land of the Yakama Indian Reservation resides. Home to around 11,000 members of the Yakama Confederation of Tribes, its sprawling landscapes once encompassed over 11 million acres of land for millennia. It now spans roughly 1.3 million acres. Since time immemorial, the traditional lifeways of the Yakama people have been deeply rooted in the natural world, with a profound connection to the land where they fished, hunted, gathered, and practiced religious ceremonies. But the historical and ongoing trauma inflicted on the Yakama people has left their traditional culture dwindling amongst many of the younger generations there. Looking for ways to address this growing issue, Chief Alvarez of the Yakama Nation's Corrections and Rehabilitation Facility turned to forest building in hopes of reconnecting the inmates to the land and plants that once shaped their culture and heritage. After hearing about the Miyawaki Method, he and his colleague got in touch with our SUGi forest maker Ethan Bryson, together with the inmates and with the guidance of traditional gatherer Marylee Jones. They planted the healing forest with the support of SUGi. So we had the privilege to speak to Marylee and Ethan Bryson about the healing forest and its growing impact on the community there. Hi Marylee, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Thanks for coming on, we really appreciate it.
I'm just very grateful to be a part and connect with you on this podcast.
For those people who might not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about the Yakama Nation?
So the way that I like to think about it is I'm a food gatherer. And so what does that mean for other individuals? It would mean like a forager, somebody that is into working with plants. So what my people have done since the beginning of time, since there was even anything written, any kind of context there, was we lived within what is now the United States, and the understanding where we lived would be pretty much core into Washington State and Oregon, and even up into Canada, down into California, possibly even as far down as Mexico. And how do I know that? Because the plant family brings us together in showing us where all of the roots, the plants, the animals that we utilized, the only thing that was our boundaries was respect. And so as a part of the Yakama Nation now, it is something that the federal government has decided to separate the people from the land and saying, you will now be Yakama, you will now be Umatilla, you will now be Blackfeet, based on the proximity of where they were. So the Yakama Nation, it's over 11,000 people strong. And it's one of the largest tribes in the state of Washington.
And being a traditional gatherer, what does that mean in terms of like the lifestyle and the philosophy behind it?
So the lifestyle of a gatherer, I can't even try to relate it to anything else. I just can tell you, as a little girl, one of the first things I can remember is when my mom had left to go to work, she would leave me with my grandmother. And my grandmother would be so ginger with me and so sweet. She would load me on the back of the car. I'd still be in my pajamas, covered up. And before I knew it, she was already rustling around doing all her things before the sun came up. And she would have this thermos pouring some hot tea. And we would sit on these little itty bitty stools looking at the sun coming up. And she would go out and she'd gather. And she wouldn't say, Marylee, get over here. She would just gather. She would take her cup in, and it was a stick. It's almost like an extension of a woman's body. She'd push it down into the ground, pull it up, and out would come this root, shake it off, and she'd put it in her basket. And she'd keep doing that. Well, I would try to imitate and copy her, but she would ask me to see this sister, which we call her a sister, this root, and know this is what she looks like. This is what she smells like. This is what she tastes like. This is where she lives. This is the time of year she comes out. So it was a very, very intimate introduction. And she taught me how to take care of her very gingerly, peeling her and then understanding she's alive, pulling the tops off, and then returning all of the peelings and the excess back to the soil where she came from, just as if it was a funeral in itself of shedding some of those things. It was very beautiful. And so being exposed to that, I guess I don't know any other way. For me, my grandmother introduced self-sufficiency to me and taught me how to take care of myself. And I think about those times because it was that kind of loving endearment that brought about this wish for this lifestyle. She never said, you will learn this, you will know this. She broke the cycle of fear. And I'm very grateful for my grandmother, for my great grandfather. They were the ones that specifically lived that lifestyle of not just the root digging, but the berry picking, the fishing, and the hunting, the preserving, the being able to take care of hides, make moccasins to clothe us, the whole deal. So I guess the philosophy would definitely be a true self-sufficiency for an individual.
Mm-hmm. And creating the Healing Forest, this was part of a rehabilitation program at the Yakama Nation's corrections facility. How did you get involved with that project?
Some of the work that I do, one of the volunteer work areas is within an area of giving back to the children. And so I have a group of dancers from 3 to, I think my oldest one is 70, 75. We teach dance within some of those areas. I end up working with the Yakama Nation Corrections Department. It's a rehabilitation facility. And during that time, Chief Vernon Alvarez had asked if I could come in and share some of the ways that I work with the culture, because he found that there was like a state of resiliency that was taking place, and he wanted to see that happen within the inmates. And so during that time, he asked for some demonstrations, and ended up finding out that the core source was definitely following the roots, the plants. And then what he tried to do was he built a garden and said, here we go, let's try this, let's mimic it. And I said, yeah, that's not the same thing. And so then he went into the healing forest, and to my surprise, he placed a bunch of thought into the indigenous plants growing around the area. And working with Ethan Bryson, came up with all of these beautiful plants that I didn't even know that there was like a category or listing. I just knew them growing up. And so developing that forest, it gave so much more insight as to how we could teach and refamiliarize, reconnect some of the inmates to understand what time of the year it was. That even if it's March and maybe it's St. Patrick's Day or Easter for other people, for us, it's the time of the Four Sisters. And those sisters are coming about to bless us with their plants and their presence in their food. So that's how I got introduced to the forest, was an introduction of how we're going to work on rehabilitation for the inmate.
And Ethan, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for speaking to us.
It's my pleasure.
So you've been using the Miyawaki Method for a while now, restoring native forests around the USA. How did you first get involved with the Healing Forest?
I was contacted by an individual. Her name is Deborah Bird. She was looking to find solutions to help the inmates at their corrections facility rehabilitate and connect with native plants. For her, the appeal was the rapid regeneration of native forests, as well as looking to to incorporate traditional foods and medicines within these spaces.
And the town that the corrections facility was in, can you tell us where it is geographically and what's it like there?
So Toppenish is east of the Cascade Mountain Range. It's a very arid region. It gets about 10 inches of rain per year.
And the land, what was the land like that you were working with?
It was a former agricultural site, so it was just bare land. Yeah, it was just land that had been tilled excessively. So, it was fallow. So there was no life in the soil. Essentially, it was very, very, very basic. Nothing definitely that you could easily support any kind of plant life without other chemical inputs.
Okay, so it was a challenging patch of land, but using the Miyawaki method, which you do, it is an all natural approach.
So that's definitely a distinction that we always make with our forests, is that we're not using any synthetic inputs. It's a biology based approach. We're letting the biology pull the nutrients out in a plant available form that the trees and shrubs need, so that you don't need fertilizers.
So how do you approach this kind of soil issue?
There's two ways to look at it. We can look at the structure of the soil, and we can also look at the biology of the soil. But what we discovered is that if you address the biology in the soil, some of those physical properties aren't necessarily as impactful in terms of seeing success in these forests. Even in this area, which is quite arid, the soil when we first started was hydrophobic. It was powdery. It was a former agricultural site, and so we took soil samples in the beginning, and then again 6 months later. And actually, to our surprise, in only 6 months, the moisture retention increased by 6 times.
Wow. In 6 months, that's pretty impressive.
This was definitely surprising, but it also, it was super exciting, because it was saying that in such a short time, we're creating this sponge in the soil it's holding the water and allowing the groundwater to recharge at a much faster rate than if that forest wasn't there.
Yeah, it's always surprising, again, how fast these changes can happen. So how many trees were planted in the area?
So we were able to plant in all a little over 5,000 native trees and shrubs, and it's about an area of about a third of an acre. And in this proximity, we're planting within the parameters of the Miyawaki Method, where we're planting about 300 to 350 trees per 1,000 square feet.
And I know species selection is a really important part of Miyawaki forest building, but for this forest particularly, it felt extra important because of the nature of the healing forest, but also the cultural context and the history behind a lot of these species. How did you approach this research?
So initially, there's a standard way to research this. There are different sort of steps that one can follow in terms of doing an actual site survey of the older forests and the riparian areas, and then seeing what is actually there. And sometimes there's mixed sort of information that you can get from that, because you often find invasive species in these forests. And so, of course, you need to cross-check this with other research that's available. But I did realize in this process that sometimes even this research might be lacking in terms of traditional oral information that's been passed down throughout the tribe about what plants were revered and sacred and what plants were utilized. And so, in speaking with Marylee and other tribal members about this, it really helped to inform a little bit different approach on how we could gear the forest towards the specific needs for the tribe, but also looking at potential natural vegetation with this other perspective and lens. It felt a bit more emotional than typical research, because there's a lot of trauma around even talking about some of these things within the tribe. So I wanted to be very conscientious and respectful, because it's very different when you talk about plants as brothers and sisters, and you see these plants as life-giving, as opposed to a resource to extract from. And so that's how we try to approach all of our work is from that level of respect.
And Marylee, what was this like for you, discussing or working on the species selection with someone outside of the community?
The beautiful work that Ethan does is he does his research. He knows a lot of the plants that grow in the area. And you have to realize that because of some of the trauma that's happened to our tribal communities with the devastation of the people, um, the the boarding schools, the forts, all of that, the trust level outside the tribal community, let alone within the tribal community, is tough. And so when there was a list that was formulated, I was apprehensive. Did I really add into that list? Not in the first part. Did I say, do I know what some of those are? I was shocked because I knew so many of them. So one of them was the quaking aspen. That was like visiting an old friend, because probably about 15 years ago, I remember sitting in a group where they talked about the quaking aspen in Oregon, that there's some aspen that grew alongside of the Columbia River. And so the word that describes the people living along the river is pum. And so you'd see Titanapum, Nikyawe and it would describe that. But the word Nikyawe, they told me, was a version of the quaking aspen and the sound that it makes in the wind. And that was descriptive. So for me, it felt like my late husband, my daughter, they were represented in that forest. My family was in that forest. So a lot of those plants that were put in there were already within my heart. The quaking aspen, the roses, some of the things that you would see. I think there's one that's called Oregon Sunshine, and you could see that in some of the areas that we would go gather. We didn't necessarily gather it, but it sparked some imagination and urgency to learn more plants that have been missing. But after that forest, my daughter, myself, and we went through and tried to understand what that forest was even telling us. And to this day, I mean, there's so much more that we've learned to put on our food lineup. We went from 10 to 28 that we can actually gather and put on our table now. And that's not been done for probably at least 100 years. Yeah.
Wow.
So all of that forest is our family.
Wow. So even that species selection process, that offered a monumentous reconnection to the past in a way. This concept of even building a forest, did you feel any resistance towards it as someone from the tribe and with a relationship to the tribe?
I kind of went through it a little bit blindsided, only because our gathering season is so immense. It's so, we start from February and we end probably in September. So during those seasons, we're gathering, we're cleaning, and any time we can get. So when the forest came around, I was listening to, oh, we're going to do this. And I was like, okay, we're going to put this. Wow, that's a nice list. Okay, this is the next stage. Okay, that's good. I'll be there. I mean, it was just kind of wisping through. But when I actually had a time to look at it, I was like, oh my goodness, this is taboo. Our people do not plant. Our people they do not farm. We harvest, but it's that connection with our community of plants that the earth provides. And so I was scared, and I know that before I even thought about it, they were there. And the only thing that made me feel better is there's a neighboring tribe of the Umatilla tribe in Oregon had a nursery with all of these indigenous plants. And so I thought, okay, if there's an elder or leader that comes to me, that's what I'm going to say, is that these were all purchased from a nursery, so that I didn't get into trouble with some of the unwritten laws. Well, as time went by, it started to show there was more pros than cons. A lot of, I mean, to the day, I talked to some elders and they said, Marylee, you're just reintroducing the sisters back to where they came from. And that makes me feel a lot better.
Mm. And what about the inmates? Did you notice any changes within them or any kind of reconnection there?
One specific situation is we had an inmate that was in the system for 2 years, and he had gone to gather and harvest with me prior to the forest. But when the forest came out, he opened up the floor by speaking and saying he wanted to have his daughter participate with me in a gathering year and pick up the songs, the language, the knowledge of the plants. And I thought, yeah. A lot of people say that, but nobody follows through. Well, I think the little girl was 8 years old, and it was so darn cute. I got to say this. I took her out for the first time, and typically we'll sing a song to bless the ground. And this shows where our community is at. But so we said a prayer, and then I looked at the little girl and I said, Sophia, do you have a song that you want to share? And she looked at me and she said, yeah. And I was surprised. I just met her, but she said, yeah, I want to sing a song. And so I looked at her and I said, okay, go ahead, sing it. And then, so here we are in our wing dresses and our hankies, and she starts singing, da-da-dum, da-da-dum, just beat it,
Oh.
just beat it. And so I let her finish the whole song, and then I sang my song, and she looked at me and she said, I didn't know you meant an Indian
Oh,
song.
no. That's quite sweet.
But it was beautiful because you could see the full wraparound to where she was reconnected with the land. Now she speaks the language, not fluently, but pretty strongly. She, she knows so many plants, and she's so eager to go out and gather. So that forest helped create that. And not only did she learn the songs, but she taught it to her father and her grandmother. And so that's 3 generations of power. So that's some of the things that had changed my mind. That's some of the pros.
And Ethan, did you notice any changes in the inmates during the program?
Yeah, you could see in some individuals as they started working with us, there was there was definitely some attitude with some individuals that there was really no point to doing this, or that there was this disconnect, that this was just sort of physical labor. Other people were really respectful and understood the importance of the work. But as time went on, as the days went on, and the plantings happened more and more, um, all of those people who had resistance in the beginning shifted and were working more consciously and trying to be more careful with the plants. Whereas, before they might just be putting the plant in the ground with the pot, for instance, and then just burying it, not even really caring. But then, their maybe their neighbor or the person who they were working with would guide them to do a better job, to be more um, aware of the plant's needs and the overall intention of the work that they were doing, and why it was important for the community to do the work. So just seeing that transition happen in a few days was also quite surprising.
So you've planted forests with communities all around the USA, and this communal work, this community-led forest building is fundamental to the Miyawaki Method. Did you feel it was more significant at the corrections facility?
Yeah, definitely. The experience of working with the inmates, seeing some of these individuals connect with plants like camas, which is sacred for the tribe. What I didn't understand and know was that many people, even though this is a very sacred, important plant for the tribe, many people hadn't even seen it before, or let alone planted it. It actually became quite emotional for many people. People were in tears working with some of these plants. Some of the inmates commented that for them, it was just healing to be outside working with these plants, but also to envision the impact that they were having by making this possible through doing the planting, through being part of the soil work. That they wanted to bring their families and their children to come and see what they had done.
And for the greater community, did the healing forest bring any other benefits?
So another aspect benefit that these forests have brought is that we've been able to create some jobs as well. So we've been able to create about 20 different positions for people off and on seasonally throughout these different forests for maintaining and different projects that have happened just revolving around these forests.
And so, how is the Healing Forest doing?
So the first spring that I visited the forest to check in on it, I was quite surprised and overwhelmed by the number of flowers blooming. We had planted wild roses, we planted lupine, camas, and so the combination of all these flowers was attracting this huge number of bees. There were bumblebees and honeybees and all kinds of different native bees coming into the forest. But it was this sort of visceral vibration and humming noise from all the bees. And then on top of that, there was this layer of the floral smells coming in, it just reminded me of cartoons where the scent lifts you and carries you into a space.
So below us, you're listening to a little sample of what the Healing Forest sounds like at the moment. Marylee, what have you noticed about the Healing Forest? Have you been there? What's it like for you?
Get this, before this, when I had walked out there, and I can remember walking out and there being rocks here and there, but the dirt was just powder. It was a very light brown tannish powder. There wasn't even weeds growing. And after Ethan did all of the things with soils and everything, it was beautiful because he said, Marylee, you have to see that we're rebuilding what was already done here. If you can think of a salmon of an eagle, maybe that went and caught a salmon and ate it and it left some of its remains. That's exactly what we're doing here because those are nutrients that the soil needs. And little by little, not only did the plants grow, but we started to have rabbits, frogs. We started to have mushrooms. I mean, it's its own community. And so the relationship isn't just powerful for the people. It's healing the earth, but it's also healing the people around it. And it's bringing in as like a verification as to you're doing it, the animals. And so I appreciate Ethan doing all of these things because it's so, I don't know, just so simple the way that he sees things and breaks down something so complex, but he's able to bring it together collaboratively, and it's like we're all dancing to the same music and enjoying it, and you see the beauty of this garden, the people, the resilience, the reconnection of culture, identity. It's great.
Well, it's certainly living up to its name, which is amazing. And Ethan, what was it like for you? Because it seems like quite a moving project to be part of.
Oh, it was beautiful. It was a really beautiful, wonderful experience. When I first met Chief Alvarez and some of the staff at the corrections facility, we had a meeting in the corrections facility, and I was definitely very nervous. I think sort of the heaviness of and the challenges that have been faced by the community there, in particular the community that are in the corrections facility, it was to be honest a little overwhelming, that level of trauma. And so I knew that for this forest, this is what led us to creating a healing forest, was to help those individuals reset and heal. As time went on and we were working on building this native plant list, people would often refer to Marylee as this sort of wonderful, resource and source for traditional knowledge. So when I finally met her, it was this sort of familiarity, but also this sort of sense that you're meeting someone of great significance. It actually reminded me of my wife's family in New Zealand. My wife is Maori, and so that connection where you just become part of the family.
Mm. And Marylee, what else have you seen come from the Healing Forest?
One of the things with the Healing Forest is it's provided us with opportunities to work with our children. And it's a very sacred and intimate place. It's not something that I tell everybody, come on, let's go all and have a good time. I mean, we try to create it to where it is a very warm and loving space that people will respect and understand when they enter. So my swans, my swan dancers, they've come in and they've gathered some of the currents that they've never gathered it before. And seeing them reconnect in their family, talk about, wow, this place is here for us. We can do this. The inmates, and saying, wow, I'm going to come here when I get out and I'm going to bring my children and show them this is what I did. And so for those that are in the know, it's a very magical, special place. For those that don't know yet, it's something that will be, but it's just treating it very, 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 I don't know, sacred and special. It's a very, and I hate to use that word, but magical kind of place.
Right, we've come to our end, but I wanted to ask you both one question that we ask everyone. So, what is one thing nature has taught you?
That any problems I have are just minuscule, and quite petty compared to the scale of what nature is and what nature does. Nature being just just how, I guess, the universe as a whole operates, because it's beyond just the planet. Of course, it's we're reliant on the sun and the moon. Um, so how all of these forces interact and um, create and provide the resources we need to survive and thrive.
And Marylee, what about you?
Ooh. Okay, so I think the biggest one, being a widow, and I'm 54 years old, is that everything has a time and a space. I've heard this before, but it never really clicked with me. If we had nothing but roses, it's not so much that it would be boring. It would be beautiful, but there would not be diversity. Whether it be a tulip, a rose, a cedar, whether it be any of the plants that, we gather, they all have their time. Not all of them are going to shine all at the same time. They all have the powerful time of their medicine. And they also all have to rest. They all have a time that they go back into the ground and get themselves ready while they're resting. And then when it's time for them to emerge, then we have to be patient and watch them until they're ripe and ready. Being able to love them, to be able to enjoy them and share them without saying, okay, here's a burger and there's $2. It's not like that. It's, I give my life to you. My life is now over. And I want you to do so many wonderful and splendid things with your life because I'm a part of it now. We are of the light. We are of the creator. We are of the soil. We go back to the soil. We are of the water. How magic is water? We are of the beauty and the amazingness of the most beautiful flower that you've ever seen, an orchid or a rose or even a dandelion. We share that commonality of going back to the soil. I think that's what plants teach us is we all have different medicines, we all have different times, but it takes rest, it takes patience, and it takes sharing space so that we can all collaborate, work together. And that's the biggest lesson I think I've learned.
Well, thank you both for taking the time out to speak to us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
If you like this episode of SUGi Talks, make sure you like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to support more.